Hello, everyone. Welcome to EA Zoom meeting. My name is Tara Oll, and I am very happy to be sharing astrology with you today. So welcome everyone who is here now live and everyone at any point in time who will be viewing this video on YouTube. Today, I am going to explore what I'm calling the houses of humanity. And we're going to kick around some ideas around the fourth house, the sixth house, and the associated archetypes to kind of really talk about, I'm going to a little bit more about the human experience. So this is something really I didn't plan way in advance to do this. It's kind of been on me lately to explore these pieces myself. My own chart is very focused in the fourth and sixth houses. So this is something that I have been living with. And so I'm playing around with looking at new ways of, I guess, understanding and kind of being in the space. I will also let everyone know that I'm going through a very exciting Neptune transit. So as I was sharing before we started the recording, if we start to go in some interesting direction, that may be part of the reason why, of course, in addition to Mercury retrograde. So let's jump right in. So why take a look at this? We're on planet Earth. So we're here to evolve through our humanity. And most of us are human. And I think that that is an obvious thing, but also something we forget sometimes, that we're really here because we're meant to have this experience. And so I also believe that accepting and embracing our humanity makes us healthier and happier. You know, I think it just naturally does. And we oftentimes focus on spirituality, and I put out in quotes here because we oftentimes think about spirituality as somewhere we need to ascend to, or somewhere we need to move towards, or how we need to make contact with the higher realms. And this is not to negate any of that. I think that is completely valid. But all of that is also happening in our human vessel, in our humanity. So my challenge, or maybe just part of my journey, is to have that spiritual experience in a much more embodied human way, at least this go around for me. So that's what I'm looking at here today. And I'll be very excited to hear what other people have to share once we break and have time for some feedback. So I kind of split this into two sections. I call the first part being the house of human being, and the second piece, the house of human doing. So let's begin with the being piece. And with this, you know, to me, the fourth house, the moon, and Cancer archetypes, there are differences between all of them, but they also have similarities. So for our purposes today, I am bundling them together for a shared energy, if you will. And so when I'm first thinking about, okay, and I guess I should have prefaced with this, all the houses and all the signs and archetypes are part of our human experience, obviously. I'm just picking two that to me feel maybe extra human, and that's just from my perspective. And if it works for you and if it offers you something to make your human experience richer, then that's awesome. And if it doesn't, this might not be the thing for you. But the fourth house, to me, has a lot to do with our human beingness. So we know that the fourth house and Cancer archetypes are about forming our conscious selves or our conscious identity. You know, the first three houses, the first three signs are kind of all the pieces. It's in the fourth that they come together and form something, form the identity itself. And this thing that we form ourselves into truly is based on how we feel and how others make us feel, which is so much the Cancer fourth house area of experience. And in particular, our first round of where do we fit in, where do we belong, how are people making me feel, how am I feeling, happens most of the time when we're children, right? I mean, that's when those first impressions happen. And this idea of forming ourselves into being, we tend to take whatever shape that we believe we need to be to belong and to be taken care of. So Jason Hawley shared a wonderful thing at NORWAC, a great presentation, but one thing he talked about how this idea of negative space, right? If a family already has a lot of space taken up, we tend to just fill in where we think we can fill in. So part of this fourth house beingness is where can I fit in? Which sometimes later in life, as we all know, we come to find like, wow, like I actually don't like this shape. It doesn't feel very me. And when we give ourselves more freedom later on, we can come into filling in a new space. But this is, again, all this idea of fourth house, moon, and Cancer archetypes, to me, is why it fits so well with human beingness. You know, what does it mean to be a human? You know, one of the things that makes us special as human beings is our emotional capacity. Now, I don't know what all the other beings in the universe, what their capacity is. I can only relate this to what I know. But compared to other animals, other things that we interact with here, you know, we've got this kind of special emotional juice going on. And we know, at least from the evolutionary astrology standpoint, we evolve through the emotional body. So this fourth house Cancer moon archetype, it's emotions in action. Remember, Cancer is a cardinal sign, so it's water flowing, and we are emotional beings. And through our emotional activity, right, which for me is oftentimes our reacting, right? Our emotional activity is, life is happening, how am I reacting to it? How is it making me feel? But through that activity, we actually feel ourselves into being, and we feel our being. And so, also made me realize, like, I love sharing my little drawings and whatnot. I have a lot on the moon, and I'm finding a lot of, I guess, support for myself and slowing down and kind of being in that fourth house space. How am I feeling? How am I reacting in the moment? I'll talk about this a little bit more, but how we're feeling shows us where we are, how we are in alignment with ourselves, what's actually going on for us. But it takes some patience and some slowing down to be there. So then I got going on this idea, okay, so let's look at us versus dogs. Because I was thinking about, well, what does this human beingness mean, and what can we compare it to? And having been a person who has had dogs and loved dogs and learned a lot from my dogs, I was thinking, you know, all species need Taurian things, right? I mean, we all need food, we all need shelter, we all need water, all those basic resources, if you will. But humans need more. And I'm thinking, well, and not that others don't need more as well, but from a basic level, right, we need more. What do we need that is more than that? And I think a big piece of it is that we need to feel acknowledged and loved for who we are. So I bold the who because I think that's where there's a difference. You know, dogs want love as well, but I don't know that there's an attachment to being loved for who they are. I think they just are who they are. So, you know, dogs have a huge emotional capacity, but I have never sensed that they need to have their identity validated. That seems to me to be a very human thing. I need my identity validated. I need my identity to belong somewhere. And man, that's so much Cancer in the fourth house. So if you have, you know, a lot of moon Cancer fourth house going on, this whole process of what is my identity, where does it belong, how does it fit, it's important. It's an important piece to like having fulfillment and satisfaction in this lifetime, is finding that place. And so I asked myself, well, do I think that dogs have an attachment to who they are? I don't really know the answer to this, but I don't think so. I think they just are what they are. But see, we're different there. Because we're always looking out to what's coming back in. And in a very personal way. So a little more about us versus the dogs. So dogs, just being dogs, relaxes us. Why would it be that when we're just hanging out with a dog who's just being who he or she is, why does it relax us? I think it's because we get tired of trying to be a someone else or a someone that someone else will get, right? A dog doesn't do that. I mean, we know dogs like to please, but I think that this idea of pleasing, I am really willing to bet that they just like the energy exchange when we vibrate with pleasure. Because I think with dogs, there's a lot to do with the energy. There's this energy going on. And dogs mirror our emotional state. And unlike us, dogs and other animals in nature, we know, right? They shake. Oh, something happens and like they kick and they run, they shake all their energy off. they don't spend time trying to figure it out and change it. Like, they're just naturally working with energy. Energy comes in, it has to go somewhere, you know, energy moving. And so if your dog is always, you know, barking, growling, doing things that you find annoying, you know, I think you want to pay attention to that, because that dog is picking up on your energy, and no matter how well you mask it. So anyway, all this being said, I don't even know how the dogs came in. Honestly, I was preparing this and I was like, you know, dogs just like, they seem to make sense, and then they help me do this little delineation between, well, what makes humans a little bit different than a dog. I think the attachment to identity is a huge piece of it. So the moon is so very, very human, emotionally active and reactive, right? That's us. We are. So when we are in this place of fourth house Cancer moon, you know, what's going on for us? What are some of the questions, or, you know, what's happening in this space of what I'm calling human beingness? Well, the feel word comes in everywhere, right? What feels like home? Who feels like home? And then there's this idea of empathy, right? Feeling what others are feeling, which is another huge piece of belonging. When I feel my anger, I feel me, right? There's like something really exciting, like even if the emotion might not be the emotion that you would choose, when you're having a really emotional moment, you feel yourself. You know, there are a lot of people with a lot of water in their chart that stir up emotional experiences because they just want to feel alive. Like, we have a link of emotions with being alive. So to be alive as a human is to feel, to have emotion, is to be operating with that fourth house Cancer moon orientation. So whatever makes me angry, sad, or cry, or laugh, you know, what does? I put out my feelers to find out. You know, this is that fourth house Cancer experience of what is my identity? Well, if I'm trying to form it, I've got to kind of test it out. I might run right back in my shell, as the crab is, you know, apt to do, but there is a continual of moving forward in a way that allows emotion to happen. Because why? I think it's because emotion shows you who you are as a human being, how you are as a human being. So I make another step here. To be human is to feel with attachment, because certainly feeling is not the only thing that makes us human. I mean, lots of creatures feel, but we feel with attachment. So for Cancer moon in fourth house, feeling is the measure, feeling is the gateway, and feeling is the tool. If you're working with these archetypes, you probably already know this, but you can choose to approach it with even more allowance for what is that feeling actually doing for you. And then I love the song "Give a Man a Home" by Ben Harper. You know, and the lyrics, like, I'll read part of them in case you were listening and not able to look at the slides, but he says, "Have you ever lost your way? Have you ever feared another day? Have you ever misplaced your mind, watching this world leave you behind? Won't you give a man a home?" And there goes on many verses, very beautiful. And I'm thinking, you know, he gets it. This human looking for a home. And towards the end of the song, it says, "In a world that is unwhole, you have got to fight just to keep your soul. Some would rather give than receive. Some would rather give up before they believe." And I highlighted on receive. Some would rather give than receive. How interesting, because Cancer is so much about receptivity. Receiving life as it shows up. Receiving life in a way that it will feed you and nourish you. So I put down here as well, Cancer is learning to receive life. I think it's Nunu Michaels who says it's like little baby birds that open their mouth and just trust that the mom or dad is going to drop the worms and give them what they need, right? There's this idea with Cancer being open up to life, to live, which is why food and feeding, you know, and certain level of digestion and things falls into the Cancer fourth house archetype as well. Because this idea is to believe that we can be fed physically and emotionally, to absorb with trust that we'll be taken care of. very Cancerian. So then I look at Ben Harper's charts. I think, oh, he must have all this, Cancer or fourth house stuff going on, and he doesn't. But what he does have, which in for me is even better, we don't know his exact birth time, but he has Moon trine Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter, and Moon square the nodes. And I thought, for someone to have Moon square the nodes, which we in evolutionary astrology consider to be a skip step or something, the function of the moon is what you're trying to integrate in this lifetime, like the piece that can be put back in the puzzle and make things flow. I mean, it comes out even in his music. Like, we are living our chart. It can be very exciting and affirming to look and see, wow, this guy gets it. And we can look in the chart and even see, it probably, when we can't say for sure how it came to him or not. But for those of us, like me, who have a fourth house pack full of Cancer stuff, we can feel it in him, which is validating that's a Cancer validation, that feeling of someone else's feelings, that feeling of being felt. And whether it's through, a conversation with someone or through music or through art, you feel your own feelings being felt. And even more exciting when it's expressed in a way that there's something that you can hear or see that encompasses that. And then we feel we belong. And that's one of the most beautiful things about that fourth house Cancer moon archetype. And you see someone like Ben Harper is not just doing it for himself, he shares it with the world. And someone else like me listens to that song and we have a moment of, wow, I belong, he gets it. So I put in here, I give him super moon status, even though, from a brief look at the chart, you would think, this stuff is not in there. But it is. So to feel at home in oneself and in the world is Cancer's mission. It's a pretty human thing, right? To be at home in my body, to be at home with my emotions, and then to find a place that I belong at home somewhere in the world. And I want to point this out, that Cancers oftentimes are homebodies. And it's true, we can be. But that feeling at home, that's just being translated into being at home as in a physical house. It doesn't have to be that way. That's just one natural expression of the energy. It's not the energy itself. So this sense of belonging and being at home can be played out in many, many different ways. Yeah, so I say, with the moon, we can be naked. Our form is primal and loses its edges. We think about the fourth house moon as the nurturer or the nurturing parent. It's not, it's not forcing us to be something. It's accepting us as we are and gives us room to then form ourselves in its highest expression. So someone that's carrying beautiful Cancer energy will nurture others to form their own identity in a very loving, accepting way, which is a beautiful thing. To be with someone as they are, accepting who they are, receiving who they are as they are going through their personal evolution. So the fourth house is often experienced in heightened ways or states of dependency, fragility, vulnerability, and growth. And this is why we see a lot of themes around birth, infants, children, the elderly, the sick, the helpless, because that fourth house very much is, it's about those stages of vulnerability. It's one reason why a rooted, grounded, centered Cancer that's able to sustain itself, be at home in itself, to be at home wherever it goes, it's able to be with people through the stages of life. Can be fantastic through, not just with children, but with those who are going through life transitions towards death, towards sickness, all these kinds of things, because Cancer has an ability to be there with the actual human, which is pretty awesome. And we see a lot of Cancer energy in healers, people that work in healing professions. So again, Cancer, the idea is to grow and nurture something, to protect and nurture it. And that needs to start with ourselves. Although many of us with strong Cancer, we try to do it for other people without doing it for ourselves first. And if you want a long example of that, if you just hit me up personally, and I can tell you about the first half of my life. But I can tell you, when you start to get into the Cancer groove, it's a whole different experience of the energy. Cancer is a fierce defender of the helpless. You know, why is this? Because it subconsciously feels its own helplessness and it wants to care for it, you know. Which if you can be gentle with this energy and feel that a child inside yourself, there's real beauty to seeing how the outside world, those situations reflect yourself. And it doesn't mean you have to jump in and save everything either. Okay, so I have an example of the cat. A lost cat needs a home. I recognize that cat as being lost, and that triggers how I feel lost. Now, I might not consciously be aware of this, but this is just the way that Cancer can play out in the world. So the cat is lost, and I recognize it's lost, or that it doesn't belong somewhere, and that I might need someone to take me in, right? So I have these feelings. The cat needs food and care. And I can take this a step further, saying no one gave me, let's just say, the emotional support to practice astrology that I needed. And now it's my chance to give it to myself through the cat. In taking in the cat, I'm making and adding to a family, right? Now, substitute a person for the cat. And this is very much what can happen with this 4th house Cancer moon archetype. And once you recognize exactly what it is that's happening, this is a different sort of experience. When you don't, oftentimes we tend to not recognize that our own needs aren't being met. And we can get stuck kind of trying to save that other person, if you will. Take them in, marry them, help them with this. And we usually do it better with a cat or dog because we expect so much less from a cat or dog, you know? Whether we think so or not, when it's a person, you know, we actually thought, well, if I gave you this, this, and this on some level, that you were going to, you know, this was going to be now filled up for me. And on the flip side, you know, it's easier with the cat or dog because cats and dogs are not playing out our mommy and daddy complexes. Okay. So let's take a peek at the 6th house. I do want to leave plenty of time to talk and to look at charts. So now we're moving into human doing. And the 6th house, Virgo, Chiron, I'm adopting Chiron as the ruler of the 6th house and playing around with that a lot. So I'm not removing Mercury, but you'll see me put both, and that's why. So the 6th house and the associated archetypes, and I'm calling it the 6th storm, because sometimes the 6th feels like that. You know, I make the slide say big fun, but 6th house usually doesn't feel like big fun, at least not at first. You know, it's not a particularly comfortable position. So this whole idea of 6th house, Virgo, Chiron, Mercury, doing-ness, it's the vessel of humanity. If you like a church analogy, the 6th house in Virgo is the church, and the 12th house in Pisces is the spirit. So the 6th house is the cup that holds the water of self and gives it usable form. So think about this, right? If the 4th house is all the water running underneath me, my psychological foundation, the 6th house becomes the cup that holds that water. And now I can do something with that water. It is the perfect container of our being that we are ever crafting. As many of us with Virgo know, we seem to think that we, you know, need to get it perfect. It won't be perfect in that way. It's an ever crafting process. And the 6th house also is the body and its functions and health. So with the 6th house and related archetypes, let's think about it this way. We're deconstructing, that's the yin, the physical and tangible, which is earth, self, subjective, to learn and gain a more accurate sense or perspective, which is mutable. So now we've taken all of the elements together, right? So we know that Virgo is a yin sign. When I say deconstructing, let's use this in comparison to Gemini, which is a yang sign. Gemini is constructing by adding more information, getting more. The yin mutable signs are deconstructing, I mean, they're breaking down and filtering and reorganizing what's been taken in. So this idea of deconstructing the yin, the physical and tangible self, right? It's an earth sign, physical and tangible. I'm saying self because it's in the subjective realm of awareness below the horizon. And we're learning to have a more accurate sense of self, which is a very mutable thing to do. There's a tendency with this 6th house in Virgo towards introjection. Introjection meaning we unconsciously take on ideas or beliefs or things from the outside world as ourselves. So part of the process of purity or purification that comes up with Virgo is, it's not that we're dirty, it's that we just need to filter out what isn't part of our pure essence. Getting down to who we are. So, in the building up process, right, we collected a lot of stuff that is not necessarily in alignment with our core essential being. So this is just a phase of, kind of working that stuff off. That makes it sound simple because anyone who's in a major Chiron 6th house Virgo type experience knows that it feels really difficult and it feels like it's hard to get it right. So in the 6th house experience, we were trying to adjust and find alignment within the environment. And remember, that's also the environment within ourselves. So it's like, think about 6th house, it's so hard. It's like, oh, I want to control the environment because I want to make things feel better, right? If I just could control what I eat and control how my job goes and control how this is, then somehow I will be okay. And then even the environment on the inside, we're trying to find alignment. So there's a lot of adjustment going on here, and I look at it as an adjustment of our human beingness. So a little bit to play with the 6th house, it helps me understand it or play with it in a new way when I compare it with the 12th house. Being that the 6th house is self-doing and the 12th house is self-undoing. And this is, I realize that for all the years that I've been practicing and studying astrology, I always thought about 12th house self-undoing as some kind of a self-undoing in a negative way, right? Self-undoing, like doing oneself in. It just means coming undone. It just means that the whole being we've assembled has gone through a whole cycle, and it's time to let it blur, until it goes back into the essence to come out again. And that's such a more gentle way of understanding the process between the two, but that gives you understanding for the 6th is the exact opposite. We're self-doing. And so there's a lot of focus in the 6th house of being a separate sense of self. So again, this idea of coming together versus coming undone. And both the 6th and 12th houses are transitions to a new initiation. In the 6th house, we're getting it started out there in the objective world, right? In the 6th house is a transition from everything below the horizon subjective into the objective world. We're getting ready to meet the world. We're getting ready to meet others. In the 12th house, the initiation is starting a whole new cycle from the very beginning. A very different feel. So if you have a lot of 6th house stuff going on, and you can kind of sit with this a little bit, you can recognize, how and why it feels the way it does. There's a lot going on there. And so we can think about this 6th house Virgo archetypes as a crisis of living. It's one way, because we know that through crisis we learn. But be very, very gentle in this space. These are the types of things that the material we have to work with in the 6th house experience. Service. We're learning what is useful and how to be useful. And that comes through trial and error. We learn through work, through health, self-improvement, analysis, and perfection. We are adjusting our inflated sense of self at the same time as our deflated sense of self. It's not easy, right? Oh, I've become, my sense of myself has become too grandiose. Oh, it's now become too inferior, right? So there's a lot of adjustment here. And this also is where we are specifically developing techniques and tools and methods, right, for how we're going to healthily live our lives. And we got to take care of the vessel if we want it to get us through, the rest of the cycle that we plan to do here. So the very human thing, right? We need to eat. We need a certain amount of exercise. We need sleep. These are things that With the sixth house, there's we're learning what we need and how to give other people what they truly need. So Virgo, our experience of separateness and the separate parts of things. Pisces, our oneness and the whole with no differentiation. You know, one thing about being extra gentle with the sixth house in Virgo, when you are breaking things into parts, it's really easy to lose the place of harmony of the whole experience. We get so focused on one little thing, for example, in the body, that's a hyper focus, and we can't, like, we're so in it that we can't feel everything moving together within it. So this idea of going slow is important with the Virgo in the sixth house. We're learning how the separate parts work, but the separate parts don't work by themselves. That's why sometimes we need to just accept that things are working. That doesn't mean we should not try to make improvements when we really can, but sometimes we just don't like how it feels, or sometimes we just don't understand what it's doing. And we're quick to say, I'm going to fix it or tweak it to make it suit what I think feels good. Okay. Signs on the fourth and sixth houses. Well, to me, the fourth house doorway, the sign that's on the cusp of your fourth house, is your gateway into human beingness. It's your gateway into all that fourth Cancer moon experiences that we talked about. And the sign on the cusp of your sixth house is the gateway into your human doingness. All that Virgo, Chiron, Mercury stuff that we talked about. So if you want to see, one, you know, it shows your natural approach to those areas, but it also is a way in. You know, if you want more of that, that's a natural way in the door. I look at that way around the whole chart. The sign on each of the doorways is like the gatekeeper. If you want more of it into more of the 12th house, look at the sign on the cusp. So let's think about, before we break into charts and do some sharing of ideas, let's look at the fourth and sixth together. So the fourth is ruled by the moon, and the sixth, if we consider it's ruled by Chiron, so if it's not your bent, just go with me for this experience. You don't have to adopt it, certainly, but just be willing to play for a second. The fourth is ruled by the moon, and the sixth ruled by Chiron. Chiron can be considered the higher octave of the moon, which gives them a natural relationship together. Meaning, Chiron would be, if the moon is our emotional nature, Chiron can represent that higher level of emotional intelligence, the ability to mature in our emotions and then use them in a transpersonal way. And that's a whole other conversation, but I believe that emotions, you know, we've probably barely only tapped into what we can really do or be with them. The fourth and sixth house are a natural sextile. Sextiles are an opportunity together. Fourth and sixth house, clearly opportunity. So I believe that what you are feeling and what you are doing show where you are at in your alignment. You know, if you want to know where your head is, for example, look at what's actually happening in your life. The fourth house is self-identity. Sixth house, self-improvement. Nurturing and serving, right? There's a close link. And this idea of to heal, because we know that both the fourth house and sixth house and their associated archetypes are fields of great personal healing for self and healing for others. So I think about them in combination and I think, well, there's a lot of opportunity. I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm excited, you know, to play with it a little bit more. I think that mostly I'm excited that I spent a lot of my life not enjoying, well, certain human things I love. I had a certain list of human things that I am disgusted by. And I spent a lot of my life trying to find ways to either fix those symptoms, not have to deal with those functions, not do those things. And I'm not saying I love them now, but I'm having a new acceptance and surrender into my humanness. And I'm enjoying myself a lot more. and I'm more available for people in my life, and I'm experiencing more love, and there's more ease. It is not always pretty, and I don't always think that it is running how my mind thinks it perfectly would be. But for me, this embracing of being human, it's made a difference for me. And I think for other people, that in my life as well, I see them do the same. So a little more 4th and 6th. Cancer pushes out into life, up out of the water and onto the shore. It pushes us to feel and react and belong as a unique, creative individual, right? Who am I coming out of this water forming as? Virgo learns to adapt to life, letting life flow, becoming a flexible vessel ready to serve, lovingly accepting its own evolution. Dane Ruggiero talks about Virgo, and he uses the word tolerance, and not in the way that we normally use tolerance as far as tolerating, someone's behavior, but Virgo is learning tolerance, meaning to fully accept what's going on within it, being quiet and allowing. And that is a big piece of that process, right? So absolutely, we know Virgo is amazing at the details and analyzing and making things better, and we would never want that not to happen. It's just when that gets focused on things that are not useful, it becomes a destructive energy. And there's such a beautiful piece being with a Virgo and embodying the Virgo energy when it is not obsessed in that way. Because in its ability to be flexible and adapt to life, it truly becomes this vessel that is able to shift and move, just as Virgo is. Think of it as Virgo, it's mutable earth, like grains of sand. Grains of sand come together in a sandcastle. They come apart. Then they build this, then they move here, right? There's flexibility. It's not meant to be stuck. And it's not meant to be perfect. It's meant to flow. Okay, let's get Cameron on.
Hey, what's up?
Hey. So what do you want to talk about? Is there a particular part of your chart that makes you interested to talk about this, or?
Well, really, she asked if somebody would volunteer, so I volunteered. I'm always down to hear your insight, so yeah. I just thought I was volunteer.
Yeah, well, we like to hear your insights too. So I guess based on what I've talked about so far, what would you offer? Have you had any of your own human experiences that you would, you have Chiron and Jupiter, together in Cancer. So maybe you could offer something about your experience around humanity and how that is flowing for you.
Well, nowadays it's flowing really well. I just feel like I'm really a part of it all. So I guess starting out when I was younger, it was more just all about me. But I guess the further I went into my understanding, in the 4th house, my 4th house ruled by Aries, so it was like that refinement over time, just being in the moment over time. It's like sometimes I evolve really fast, and I look back and I'm like, oh wow, that was just 2 months ago. That's crazy. I'm totally different now, in this moment. So I guess just and you said something about embodying the energy with other people. It's been really prosperous lately. Just embodying the energy for other people of that nurturing energy. That's what I've been feeling with it being in the 7th house and the Jupiter, all the intuition that comes in is for the other people. I feel that really strong, and the Chiron being there as well, the healing of the energy coming through me being for other people and embodying it. I was even driving to work a few days ago, and the word embody just came up in my head, and then the E was big and the M was big, and then it was body, and I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And then it was just the energetic movement coming to my body, and it was showing me that's what's happening. The energy is moving through my body, and that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I do it for other people now, to be emotionally nurturing to other people. And it's it's an everyday thing, consistently now. It's it's becoming my mode of perception.
Feeling is your mode of perception.
Yeah, now, which is because people, a lot of people, I'm meeting a lot of people now, and they just see me that way. And for me, it's just bonkers. for that to be my mode of perception is just like crazy. Because I mean, in a way, it's like I used to be very, I say savage, but a lot of people would say primal, you know, where it was just like, this is what it is right now, whatever, you know. And I still am that way to an extent, but it's just like really refined. Like going through the distillation process, it's just been super refining, like a refinement of it all.
You know, I believe that Jupiter stands for lots of things, right? But I think that Jupiter represents our path, the path we take through life. And so I think it's very beautiful that, you know, that your path in Cancer conjunct Chiron, it is a very human path. I wonder, do you feel like that you being you gives people permission just to be more human? Because I think that's a
so much.
But do you know
and
what
I even used to say that. I used to just say like I just want to liberate other people so I can be liberated. Like that's how I used to feel.
Oh.
Yeah. But now it's just like, yeah, there's no separation between those two things. It's like the more that I'm me, other people will be them, and it's okay.
But you know that it's a beautiful gift to give people that to me, that, like I was saying, that Cancer acceptance of me being a person as I am, no matter how that's flowing, that's huge. You know, it takes you. I believe that to be in that place to offer that to someone else, you've had to really allow that for yourself. You know, and to me, there's a certain level of accepting. You know, like for me, I can speak for myself, accepting my neediness, accepting the parts about being human that will never be exactly perfect, right? It's accepting the complexes and the things that I have going on, and that I was raised a certain way, and that I do feel a certain way, and I do react a certain way, and you know, and that there can be room for someone to say, hey, you know, I feel you, you know.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, to be felt, I mean, I don't know, I think most everyone has had a moment where you have been sharing something and you can really feel someone feel you. Like that will change your life. And if it's something important that you're sharing that you haven't felt before around it, let's just say you grew up in an environment where that kind of feeling or sharing wasn't really something that happened. The first time you meet someone who is, you know, shares that space with you, it's like, I mean, I'm not saying that none of us need permission, but most of us want it sometimes. And usually until we're able to get to a place where we're really self-autonomous, which, you know, I don't know if we ever fully, you know, get there. Somebody that feels us feeling it, and you can feel that from them, it gives us permission just to feel, which is to be. You know, it comes right back to this whole idea of it's okay for me to be how I am and have this feeling. So.
Yeah, because even you were saying that, and it felt like you were like slightly like referring to the people that I'm working with, but like the whole time it was like, yeah, like that's how I feel when I express, you know, because for a long time it was like I wanted to be right about things, but then it became like more about being in alignment. So when the truth was coming through, like, and people could feel that, I felt because it wasn't that I was right, but it was like the truth was with me and I was saying it and somebody felt that, and I felt, you know, I felt that connection. Yeah.
But you're so right. I think that if I want to be felt for me, I've got to be vulnerable enough to feel and be me, you know. And I'm just saying, some of us need a little help. Some of us need a little support to get there. So, like, when we can do that in a real human way, you know, even when it's messy, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we all know, right? The fourth house is the root of the chart. If you don't have, you know, strong ballast down there, it's really difficult to do all the other things we want to do in life, and we certainly wouldn't be able to do them to their full fruition. You know, and that's one of the gifts of astrology, right? I mean, we get to, and this gives us a language for having the conversation. Sometimes astrology is nothing but a doorway into a great conversation.
Right.
But
Ooh, that was nice.
but if that's what it takes to get in a doorway with yourself or with someone else where you haven't gone before, and that doorway is going to lead you into a new space where you have more room to be more you, God, I'll take whatever tool. You know, I'm happy to use the tool.
Yeah, I've even found that like just holding space a lot of times is all it needs. Yeah, so even like my stellium in the first house in Capricorn is like every moment holding space and time you know, for the healing for others. It's like that's how I like talk to my chart, or talk like live my chart now. And sometimes people say things and they're looking at me and they're just like waiting for me to be like, oh, that's weird, or like respond to them in a negative way. And I sit there and I just make the eye contact I was making, and they're just like, oh, like that's not a bad thing, like it's okay for that. And I could see that, and I always give them that, like, the confirmation, like, oh, you're waiting for me to like respond in a weird way. No, like your feelings are valid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that will change. I mean, that can change everything going forward for a situation or a person, or, you know, and when we do it for ourselves, right? Like when we find ourselves stuck in a certain place, all of a sudden we can actually like slow down and actually feel what's going on and allow it. You know, it's a pretty awesome space.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. I guess one thing I did notice while you were talking, I was thinking about the cusps of the sixth house. I have the moon is like on the boundary coming into it, and then Jupiter's like right above it. So if you have any like insights on that, or if you felt anything off of that.
Yeah, you're right. That moon is right on it.
And then I guess too, the Mars and the Uranus, from the fractal pattern point perspective, that would be in conjunction. So that energy is like there too as well, like a sixth house energy going on right there.
You're right. You do. Yeah, you have moon all pulled into your first house. And what is it in conjunct, or what does a quincunx ask from us to make an adjustment?
Right.
It's an adjustment aspect for sure. So there's something about all that going on that needs to be adjusted with the moon. So it's interesting, like this is, yeah, I mean, I don't have us all fleshed out for you, but that does catch my attention. And like if I were you, I would just sit and feel with that for a while. As far as the moon being in conjunct, right? Because the adjustment piece, like only you know, like what does that actually mean? What adjustment is trying to happen there?
I mean, some adjustments that I made prior to like having a full understanding of the chart, I would sit down and so I would like, because the way I talk, I have so many different types of language that I use. So it's like I'll use a big word, then I use slang, then I curse, and then say eloquent word, like all in one sentence, right? So then I would sit down and I would write down like how I could communicate with people, because I had trouble with that. So I would sit down and write like, this is how I would say it to somebody if they knew alchemy. This is how I would say to somebody if they were Muslim. This is how I would say to somebody if they were Christian. And I would just write like lists of like correlations, so I could learn how to communicate, because like my moon being there, it's like I want to be able to feel emotionally secure enough to communicate. Mm-hmm. And then one day I realized, I'm like, oh, like this is my lesson. This is my thing to do. It's like I can understand all these things, but if I can't express it, then it's not going to make me feel like I don't feel good. I don't feel safe. I don't feel like felt, like you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like I had to do that for myself. And by doing that, it ended up being of service to other people.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's beautiful. I think also, like, I would say with the gateway into the sixth house, because your moon sits on it, I mean, the moon's part of your gateway. So to me, that would say, your whole body experience, your experience with your own body, your experience with all the concepts of, service and work, kind of all this stuff, doing-ness that we talked about, right? The human doing-ness. Moon is almost like your way in, that's how I look at that. Like moon is the way in, and that's feeling in, right? Feeling into that space, feeling into the space. And then paying attention though, because especially with that Uranus quincunx with the moon, that's asking for liberation on some level too, like,
oh yeah.
So like the words aren't enough, it's almost like, and I think you were talking about the words, how you use the words, how the words come out, like I don't know exactly what I would say about it, but there's something about, like, the words aren't always it. Like, even that idea of being able to say it this way to this person, this way to that person, like, there's a language beyond be underneath the word. And that's what you speak.
Yes, very true. That's so true. Yeah. Cause I started doing like a lot more hand movements and even like using silence as a language to like help people understand things more like experientially.
Yeah. Yeah. Because moon into the sixth house, right? I mean, that's a feeling. Think about that. That's a feeling approach to like an earth, body bound house. The moon brings mystery into it as well. So, yeah, that's beautiful. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else, Cameron, before we talk to Barbara?
No, you can go talk to Barbara. Appreciate the insight. Gratitude.
Thank you for sharing so much, Cameron. It was always a pleasure.
Yes.
Okay. Barbara.
Yo.
Where do you want to go?
Well, yeah. A lot you said sparked so much. So, it's interesting you were talking about becoming more human, and probably the reason why I was attracted to your presentation is I feel like, the home I grew up in was kind of the opposite, was kind of restrictive and robotic and anti-creative. And, my father was like the great Santini military type. So I feel like my job, and I was always very emotional, and so I kind of didn't fit in. And, it's almost like I feel like I've had to become more human, like almost for my ancestry, for my ancestral healing. So, and what you said about ballast in the fourth house, I mean, having Pluto there, I've gone from home to home, been homeless really most of my life, it's just been, so I think the job is to find be the turtle to carry my home with me wherever I go. I've been working on it quite a while.
Yeah.
I guess maybe my question.
And you have moon in the first house, so we know that's important to you. I mean, moon in the first house is a very personal placement for the moon.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I have this thing, whenever I'm in groups, whether healing groups, therapy groups, feminine empowerment groups, like that I have to be very transparent and vulnerable. Like I feel it's my job to say, like, we can be vulnerable. It's okay, So I don't know if that's maybe because I have the the thing I eventually want to bring in is the Chiron, which is a skip step for me, and it's conjunct my sun. So, that's pretty intense. It's conjunct my sun, and it's a skip step, square the nodes. And so people are always saying, you're really empathic, you're insightful, are you a healer, are you a teacher? And yet I've had so much trouble, I don't know, maybe giving myself permission to be a healer, like that, okay, that's okay, you could be a healer, so I don't know that, and the role of Virgo, because it's the south node. So I'm kind of curious how the Chiron skip step and the south node, kind of works into the plan as far as, evolution.
Yeah. If we just take Chiron on its own for a second, when being that it is the part of us that we feel, and I'm sure but for the benefit of the recording and all of this, that the part of us that we feel like is just not good enough or not perfect or just it's a broken part. We actually don't believe on some level it can be fixed. Or there's something not good enough about us. That is kind of Chiron's signature, right? But it also is our medicine. It is the very, very thing that we are meant to love about ourselves, fully feel about ourselves. It is, and it is my belief that Chiron is a major gateway to humanity because it allows us to feel all the ways that we don't feel adequate, all those things, which gives us real access to what's truly inside of us. And once we've done that, like you were talking about transparency, once you've done that, being in space with someone else is truly possible. I really do not believe that we can be of help to someone else truly unless we've been able to be in the space ourselves. And that place that feels like the most tender or frightening or whatever word you like to use, that is probably one of the most juiciest places for you to be. And when you can be there with yourself, you then know you can be with someone else. Chiron in Sagittarius, from a sacred wound standpoint, that Sagittarius can mean different things. Part of it can mean just simply not believing in one's own truth, not believing that you are able to speak the truth, not believing that the truth, not believing that what you say is a lie. That can be tied to it. Also, it can just simply be confidence. That Chiron and Sag can very much feel like it lacks the confidence. It lacks the buoyancy. It lacks the ability to be, to hold enough righteousness that that is inherent. So it's interesting when you think about speaking your truth. And with the sun tied there as well, the sun again has a very much to deal with our sense of purpose, right? All that stuff in Sagittarius, right? Something. That's also your intuition. Chiron in Sagittarius, I don't trust my intuition. It's faulty. I can't trust my inner guidance system. Something is wrong with it. And even, Barbara, even if, we didn't say that out loud, there's almost always, I think, with that signature piece of that. I can't trust me, what I just know. So then we spend time either needing to prove it, study it, like maybe you get a hunch, or that what I'm saying right now is absolutely not right. And instead of sharing that, you might go back and look it up in a book and try to prove what it was, instead of just saying, what, I feel right now blank. But when you start to trust your intuition more, and I know you're already doing this, so I'm not speaking to this in a way that like you just were born yesterday, but with that signature, anything with Jupiter, even difficult Jupiter aspects, right, along with Sagittarius, we win when we trust our intuition. Jupiter's a skip step in my chart. A little different flavor, Barbara, but we're in the same game. And we don't have to have a degree or a backup or a confirmation somewhere for it to be true. And other people don't have to agree. So I would say a big part of this for you is to, when you feel it, to trust it.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have said, stop being a student and be a teacher. You don't need any more accreditations. And I think, not that I have that many actually, but I think that most of my life, you nailed it in terms of the theme has been finding my voice. And Taurus rising kind of fits with that. Mm-hmm. And when you were saying questioning or doubting yourself, I feel like it ties back to the Pluto in the 4th, because I was so much, different growing up. And I had a breakdown at 13, and my father refused family therapy. And the message to me was, you are so different from us that we can't come together. It's all on you. You're the problem. There's something wrong with you. So I feel like I had to, kind of struggle. I left the house because I knew, other things happened, and I was raped, and, it was just never ending. And I finally just left where I grew up and moved to other cities, because I knew that environment was always going to give me the message that my difference was not a good thing. And somewhere, being a Sagittarius, somewhere deep inside me, I knew it was, but that I had to kind of find the environment, the atmosphere, the philosophy, so I studied metaphysics, everything to like kind of verify that for myself. Yeah.
And it can be, I think, with that signature too, it's like, Sag is your personal truth. It doesn't, in the context of your skip step, it doesn't have to be universally true. You're here to develop and share your personal truth. And I think there's a certain element of letting go of that, of it needing to be, like there is, in that context, it is always okay. I think you mentioned transparency earlier about being transparent with people. I think your Neptune in the 6th house is interesting signature for transparency, right? Like the 6th house of that human doingness, being transparent about it. We know that Neptune also can bring a whole other slew of things, but just in that idea of transparency, I actually wouldn't have thought about it that way, but that's actually very beautiful. Your human process ruled so much by the sixth house has Neptune in it. And what have you chosen to do? Be transparent about it. Much nicer word than to be disillusioned, you know, or to be, you know, escaping it. Like, that's the flip side, right? Neptune in the sixth house could be escaping it, could be not seeing it clearly, could be fantasizing about it, could be literally like not doing it at all. You know, sometimes Neptune in the sixth house, people stop taking care of themselves. But you choose transparency. I mean, I hope that you give yourself a lot of credit for how, whether we recognize these things or not, that's a beautiful way to work with that energy and to share that energy.
Yeah, I mean, I write things that are very raw, and I didn't discover this until I was in a women's group a couple of years ago, you know, kind of with the Pluto-Uranus squares, all hell breaking loose in 2013, where everything changed. And, you know, I was in a group of women, and I was amazed at the feedback I got, because I made myself so open. You know, it does give permission to other people, so it built community. And so based on that, and then in the next women's group where I did that, then there was my Mars in Aquarius, you know, then there was this issue with I went too far with truth, and then I was like kind of excommunicated again. So it's kind of like I'm finding this balance, and maybe that's Saturn and Libra, how to give the message that's totally honest and transparent, but that people can hear. It's not triggering, you know. So after that, I started this group of women, because I said, well, you know, I'm going to be my sovereign self. If I'm too radical, my truth, for established groups, I'm starting my own group, you know. So I had this group called Fire Sisters Rising, in which, you know, we share really cutting edge stuff, you know, and it's not either politically left or right, but it's like the truth, you know. Of course, like you said, that everyone's truth is different, but that's part of me being able to express my truth and creating a space for it. You know, where for the longest time, and certainly in jobs, there just wasn't the right space for it, you know? Yeah.
You know, the South Node in Virgo and North Node in Pisces, that balance between doing the self building up, right, and the coming undone, or the doing and the undone, or whatnot. It's an interesting balance, right, between the two. I would say that, especially, you know, you got Saturn sitting down there on the south. I think it's interesting. I know you have a bunch of stuff in Capricorn, and your Pluto polarity point is the 10th house, but I feel that there's less. I think you've already done a lot of doing. You know what I mean? Like, I think you've done so much doing, and I think there'd be a lot of joy for you. Part of that reclaiming that Sun Chiron in Sagittarius is just naturally being, and that is the best teacher that exists, you know, the one that is naturally being, because kind of like when Cameron and I were talking about as well, you give other people permission, you know, to find their truth, to speak their truth. In Sagittarius, it's not even enough just to speak, you got to be it, right? Sag is life happening. It's not a conversation, it's life being. You know, it's a difference between the Gemini map and Sag going to the land. Like, you know, you being in your own landscape, in your human landscape.
I got very tired because I felt I was trying so hard for years, you know, and I mean, moving, I didn't have family support, you know, big jobs in New York, you know, and it's like, maybe it's I have a T-square to Saturn. I just overworked. And so when I had this, then I just had this kind of union job that was supporting me in New York with the theater. And when there was a blow up around truth there, when I left that job, I was just like, I'm not going to work for a while. You know, I'm fucking sick of this shit. You know, it's kind of like, I just want to like be myself, you know? Yeah. So that's really, I meditate more than an hour a day. I mean, as long as I can do this financially a bit longer, I'm in a course for nervous system embodiment to get back into my body more. So
okay, excuse me, it's Linda. We have to wind down now. So sorry about that. So Tara, any final words from you?
No, Linda, is there anything that you want to say, or is there anything that we need to open up before we close?
Not really. Just want to say thank you very much to you and to the volunteers, and we really must wind down now. So thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Barbara, for sharing.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you,
Bye,
Tara.
everybody. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Wanda.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tara. This was great.
Bye.
Thank you.